Hello, and welcome to Workplace Stories, the podcast where human capital experts share their real-world experiences and insights. Hosted by Red Thread Research, Workplace Stories surfaces the latest industry trends, innovative talent strategies, and best practices for success. Tune in for practical advice on how to best transform your workplace.
Welcome to Workplace Stories. We just finished talking to Mitchel MacNair, who's the Director of Talent Development and Learning at Crown Castle. Stacia, what stood out for you from this conversation?
We talked to a fair number of learning folks, and I love learning, despite many people's comments otherwise. But I don't always see the parallels with people analytics and some of the people analytics work that we've done. But with Mitchel, I did. The thing that jumped out at me was how he was talking about building the reputation of L&D and changing its perception within the organization. And he said many of the things that I've heard really good people analytics leaders say. So things like take appropriate projects at the beginning to build up your reputation, then move on to higher value projects once you've got more of an emotional bank account. Be thoughtful about who you're working with and how you can make an impact, of course, aligned to business outcomes, et cetera. But that very strategic approach to building reputation was something that I don't know that we've heard other L&D leaders talk about, but I have on the people analytics side. So that was really cool to hear from him. What about you?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, in that I think it's a really interesting business case for L&D, which I'll get to in a second, but it was a more interesting business case for leadership. Like changing the mindset of a team and the organization and what he could offer. As far as building reputation, we didn't restate it in this, but in our pre-call, he said, "Hey, do you watch Ted Lasso?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you remember that episode where he fixes the showers?" So he comes in, he has no credibility. And then he's like, "Team, what can I do?" And they said, "You should fix the showers. You could fix the dumb showers." And he's like, "Okay." And so he fixed the showers. And all of a sudden everyone's like, "Oh, he fixed the showers. I can actually use this to do something." It built his credibility in a way that maybe solving a larger, more strategic problem wouldn't have. And so I loved the way he talked about that. As far as being just a good case study, the thing that struck me is he's been there a year and a half, and he's been able to change how the organization feels about him and how his team operates to do some of this more strategic work. It struck me because a lot of the conversations we're having with L&D, people trip over not, quote unquote, having a seat at the table or not having the data that they need to make decisions. He didn't let either of those things stop him. He goes out and pushes his way into conversations he thinks he needs to be having and finds the data and builds a relationship to get the data in order to make the changes he thinks needs to be made. In all, I thought it was a really good discussion.
I'd say not just that he pushes his way in, but he has a clear way of articulating the value that he brings that other person may not understand. So he gave that example of AI and how L&D could help with the AI initiatives with I think it was the director of security. And he was very clear in what they brought, why they were important. And then after they delivered that value, now they're being brought into all the conversations, if nothing else, sometimes just to provide feedback and an informed point of view, which I think is the dream for so many.
Yeah, for sure. We really enjoyed our conversation with Mitchel. We think he provides a really good case study, not just for L&D, but for anybody who's trying to gain credibility as a people leader. If you like this podcast, if you like this episode, go ahead and drop us a review or at least a like on the podcast platform of your choice. And if you're interested in some of the research that we're doing at Red Thread, join our membership at redthreadresearch.com.
If you like what you heard today, check out our Red Thread Research membership. We have a wonderful community. We have studies and research that we publish on a range of people practices as well as HR technology. And we also have discussions on a regular basis, including virtual meetups and all sorts of other things to get you connected to the insights you need to solve your biggest people problems. Check us out at members.redthreadresearch.com.
Welcome, Mitchel. We're really happy to have you on this episode of Workplace Stories.
Great. Glad to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, we've known you for a while. Stacia and I were talking about how long we've known you, and you've been a good sport of Red Thread and said some really smart things. I remember one specifically about a DMV, which I thought was particularly really brilliant. We're thrilled to talk to you about your first year at this particular organization and how you've been able to change it and its learning culture. So to start, why don't we start with like the basic first date question? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I spent about almost 10 years in the Navy on submarines right out of high school. And I was a nuclear electrician's mate. While I was in the Navy, I was also an instructor at the Navy Nuclear Power Prototype Training Facility. That's where I had my first real taste of what I would consider L&D. After the Navy, again, about 9, almost 10 years, I joined Dow Chemical. I spent almost 25 years at Dow Chemical, and I had a couple, I would say, small careers within Dow. About 9 years in engineering, instrument engineering to be specific, and then I moved over to supply chain, ethylene supply chain planner for North America, came back to engineering as a director of engineering for about 5 years. Then about the last 9 years that I was at Dow, I was in the Center of Expertise for Talent. At Dow, I had the last part of my career there was really focused in thinking about the experience that we could improve for our people around learning. Had the opportunity to come to Crown, a different industry, a different size company, very much smaller company. And it's been an exciting adventure over the last year and a half. That's a little bit about my background.
So it's non-traditional for an L&D folk.
It's very true. I tell people I'm not homegrown HR. I'm not homegrown L&D. My background is very much steeped in operations and engineering, I would say. So I've told my team when I first came into the team, I told them I'm not very much interested in traditional learning metrics. They don't mean anything to me. Hours of training, they don't mean anything. So let's focus on the business metrics. That's some of the differences that I come into this role with.
You know, it's funny. We say that it's not a very traditional background, and it isn't. But I happen to know 2 other people who worked on nuclear submarines who went into L&D.
Awesome.
So maybe there's some magic there that we haven't thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think just one thing off the top of my head on that, I would just say is that you're taking 17, 18, 19-year-olds fresh out of college and you're teaching them how to safely operate a nuclear power plant on a ship or a submarine in a very short amount of time. So you have to know how to do that really well. And the Navy has that down to a T. And so I was able to leverage some of that methodology into Dow. And we're looking to leverage some of that into Crown as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's incredible learning transfer, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that builds on kind of the next question that we tend to ask people, which is, why should we listen to you, aside from what you just mentioned?
First of all, I'm humbled that I'm even asked to be on this podcast because I've seen lots of rock stars on the podcast. So I told my wife, I said, I hope I have something interesting for somebody to hear today. But what I would say is because I have had a varied background coming from across several different domains, a couple different industries now, I've seen really good things in learning, seen really not so good things in learning. The other piece of it is, this is something I would encourage everyone to think about, is becoming a student all the time to think about what you can learn. And I will tell you that even over the last 5 to 10 years, my learning has been accelerated by colleagues on LinkedIn, right? Learning from each other. But I think I have been able to cobble together some of the best things that I've seen from thought leaders in our industry, and then being able to apply that with a fresh slate as I came here to Crown Castle. And I'm really excited about the things that we've been able to do in such a short period of time and the results that we're getting. So I think maybe some of those stories that we can talk about there might resonate with some folks.
So let's talk a little bit about Crown Castle. So you spent 25 years at Dow. You came into this new, I would say, challenge. And I'd love to understand a little bit about the environment that you came into. What is Crown Castle facing right now?
My first 6 months at Crown, I would consider it a building phase because we had people who left the organization. Somebody retired, somebody left for an internal opportunity, somebody left for an external opportunity. We had a reduction of force in the first 6 months that I was here. So I ended up losing about 50% of my team in the first 6 months. And so I had to replace those folks. And what I would say is my team that was here after all of that, excellent. They're all excellent. And by the way, we've lost some really good people. But what I would say is that, and I think this is just a basic leadership skill, is being very selective about who you bring onto the bus. The people that we've hired have been incredibly talented people that really complement our existing team. I think having those right people on the bus has had a really big impact on us. So after the first 6 months and just kind of building the team, like I mentioned, we had a riff. We've had activist investors coming after our CEO and our board for strategic strategy. We've lost our CEO. We've had 2, this is all public, right? We lost our CEO. We lost 2 board members. There's a proxy fight for board members. Our new CEO has had his hands full I would say, coming into that kind of an environment. I've told people I've seen those kinds of things happen like over my career, but not in a 9-month period. So to see all that happen in a very short period of time, I think has been tough on people, everybody, not just my team.
I have kind of a follow-up question to that. In organizations that are experiencing great change, that's one of the times we've seen where organizations can experience great change, meaning if it's chaos, then let's make all the changes right now. I'm wondering from your standpoint, have you found it easier to make the changes you need to make because of all that chaos, or has it been more difficult?
I think because we already had a plan in place and we're transforming how we were going to work, we were ahead of the change. I've told my people on my team today that if we were the same team that we were several years ago, I would be really worried for our team. We've gone from being order takers to strategic business partners. We're still on that journey. I think there's still people in the company that we're still building that reputation with, but I'm seeing it happen very quickly, and I'm really happy with what I'm seeing, how we're treated and how we're respected for our expertise and how we can come to the table and help solve real business problems instead of just saying, hey, I need an e-learning. Can you take care of that for me?
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about how that's changed. I'm specifically interested in the structure of your team, but it sounds like there's also a mindset component that's gone along with this.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a federated L&D model at Crown. First of all, when I first came here, was one of the first things we did is we implemented an org design change inside of our group. So there was an effort being led by talent acquisition to look at career pathing, and they were going through and looking at job titles and things like that out in the industry and trying to figure out where do we need to make updates. And so my team was actually one of the first teams that was a recipient of that work. We originally had instructional designers and technical training managers, just 2 roles. And prior to COVID, we were doing a lot of face-to-face training. COVID hits, now it's all online. But coming out of that, when I came here, first of all, I think one thing that was important is that we provided a career path for our L&D team members through that career pathing. So we have a learning designer 1, 2, 3, senior designer, and then principal designer. Now, there's a couple things that came together that has helped us in that space, I think, be successful. That principal designer role, I think, is a key role because they really act as a strategic partner that's embedded inside of the business. And they act as a gatekeeper to our intake funnel. That's a big responsibility. And they also serve as a consultant to the business. So just to give you an example, when I first got here, one of our principal designers did a big intake project for our tower business. And she analyzed all of the data. First, there was between 150, 200 requests. She said, just give me everything. I don't care. If you think it needs training or learning, give it to me. But she analyzed all that data and came back away with like 6 major projects that said, hey, like, for example, this one project will solve about 65 of those requests. In the process of doing that and analyzing that data, we found that about 60% of our requests are not best served by our team, but rather end up being communications, or it ends up being a consulting engagement. So that principal designer role is, I think, a key part of our success. The other part of our success, I think, is also what we call our business partnership model. And so, again, when we were just order takers, our team would take input from anybody in the company who had a request. We didn't really see or have visibility into, is this really important? How is this tied to strategic objectives or anything like that? So what we've done is, as part of this org change, was also to say this business partnership model, and we implemented those both at the same time. And we have a group inside of Crown that's called Business Performance, and they work with business leaders inside of those lines of business, and they help those business leaders put together their strategic roadmap for each year. So they have their priorities listed. They know what those are. So we've come alongside those teams and we've said, hey, look, we want you to tell us what the priority is. Like, we don't have any problem. You tell us what's a priority. Everybody is short on resources, so we want to invest our resources in the most efficient way. So we want to put our resources against the top priorities for the business. And that, by the way, has been a success for us. The other thing that I've kind of helped our business performance people see this as is I give them an analogy. And I said, think of a doctor-patient relationship. So I said, the business performance team acts like a general practitioner. The patient is the business coming and saying, hey, I have a problem. How can you help me? While business performance acts as a general practitioner, in the process of looking at what that patient's problems are, we act as a specialist. So in the cases where our principal designer says, hey, that's something that our group can help solve, then we're treated like a cardiologist. Now, what I would say is that we talk about having coordinated diagnosis or discovery and coordinated solutioning. Meaning, if you went to your doctor and you had to give blood, and they tell you now you're going to have to go see the specialist and they have to take blood, you're thinking, why couldn't you just take all the blood at the same time? And then you guys talk about it, right? So we try to connect early with them when we're doing that diagnosis and the early phases so that, again, as we're trying to understand the problem, business performance is asking questions from their perspective, from their perception of what do they want to hone in on. We're also listening for what we think might help us in assisting the business. So we have additional questions. So we want to have that discovery as a coordinated discovery so that we can also have a coordinated solutioning. So that's, I think, some of the biggest changes in how we're organized, but also how we're operating with some existing teams to help us be successful in this new model.
I think this is interesting for a couple of reasons. First thing is we're doing a learning strategy study right now, and it is trite at this point. We got to align with the business. We got to align with the business. We got to align with business. We got to align with blah, blah, blah. We hear it over and over and over and over again, right? But nobody actually talks about how you do that. It's brute force, right? Like you got to get in the rooms where those decisions are being made. You got to get the information that you need in order to determine where you are, all those types of things. I think the other thing that's interesting is, and we talked a little bit about this on a pre-call, we're seeing some convergence of people practices. So you said, hey, we're not the best solution for this, but another team might be. Are you seeing that within your organization as well? Sort of like convergence of learning and talent acquisition or learning and performance and those types of things? And what does it look like if you are seeing it?
That's an interesting question because we are seeing that. Some of that I'm wondering if I'm seeing maybe more of it now because we're a smaller company than what I came from.
Yeah.
And so everybody had every piece of HR sub-functions covered, right? Where we share some of those responsibilities where we don't have a particular traditional HR person. But definitely overlap between talent acquisition and learning and development. I see a strong overlap there. I think as we move forward, and we'll talk later about skills, but I think as we move forward, all of this data around skills is, I think, the foundational or infrastructure. To me, the ultimate prize is strategic workforce planning. It impacts all areas of talent management. And so I think by virtue of that, which gets into the weeds of who really owns the data, but I think we all have a responsibility to own the data and we have a piece to play in the overall picture. At the end of the day, we want to have a seamless experience for our teammates inside the company and for our leadership. So we have to work together in that sense.
One of the things I think is interesting, back to what you're talking about just a moment ago, is this idea that you're drawing the blood at the same time, meaning that you're getting the information at the same time as the HR business partner is. Like one of the things we've talked about, particularly with people analytics, is what can be this challenge, which is that you're getting it at the secondary or third level, like it's just continuing to get passed down, and like telephone, it's not always accurate by the time it gets to you. And so I think that that distinction around when you're getting the information and how you're getting it is one not to underestimate.
Absolutely. To be successful in any of this, there are some things that we've had to do that we wouldn't normally have done as we look at our future. But we've said we're going to take that and we're going to deliver well on that because we're going to build a reputation of execution with excellence so that we can build a reputation of somebody who knows what we're talking about and we come back with good results. As we have delivered, even on some what I would call those lower quality items, that has given us permission to then be heard when we say, hey, we hear what you're asking for, but let's talk about what we think might be a better solution for you. So that has opened the door for us to be able to present other ideas that now, as we're seeing it, as we're coming out and where people can see, wow, I didn't realize this is something else that you could do for us. So we're seeing that happen. So I think that's one piece of it that's really important. That also helps you get access to data, which is what you were mentioning. As we're showing ourselves able to take this and bring back something that's valuable to the business, that then becomes an opportunity for future opportunities to work and collaborate with our business partners.
Can you talk us through that thought process? Because what you just said is I actually also hear in people analytics, which is this idea that you take on projects that may not be as sexy or fun or apparently high impact in order to build the reputation and expectations of leaders of what you can do. The challenge I could foresee people saying, okay, true, but Mitchel, you just said that you looked at the data. A whole number of projects are not ones that you can solve well or best or highest impact. So how do you balance that need for efficiency and impact with building credibility and reputation in the organization?
The first part that I would say is, as a leader, you have to keep the long game in mind all the time. Because if you don't, you could start taking those and then you get into a habit and people get used to you. Oh, you're the pivot table guy. I'm going to give on my pivot table. I don't want to be the pivot table guy. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I want to do it all the time, right? It's that kind of thing. So this is the critical part about our principal designer role, is that they have to build the relationship first and show their expertise. It's like the emotional bank account. You have some money in your emotional bank account, so to speak, to say, hey, can I show you something else that I think we can do that's even better than what you're asking for? To me, I think the key thing is the leader has to think the long game so you don't get trapped in doing those little tiny things, because that can eat you up. You can be swarmed by gnats, is what we like to call it. Did I answer that question all the way?
I think so. I mean, I think what you're saying is yeah, you may take on a few of these just to build that emotional bank account, but don't get yourself in the habit of doing that or setting anybody's expectations that that's what you do or how you deliver the most value.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
I know I just threw that one in. We didn't prep it, but it just seemed interesting. So
awesome. It's a great question.
But I do want to ask you, because it actually ties into this, is you thought about your team, right? So making those decisions is a different mindset. So I'd love to hear, how did you get your team to level up their skills, whether that's their kind of core skills or also just the way that they're thinking about problems based on where you felt the development needed to go at Crown Castle?
Yeah. First of all, I have to say, going back to some of the things that I said at the beginning about my team, I have an absolutely awesome team. People are just incredible. For the folks that were here and have been here from the beginning since I've been here, they've had these skills, but it wasn't the right strategy. They didn't have the org design to enable them to do some of the things that they were capable of doing. So what I would say is, again, I think I mentioned this to y'all before, but I've never really seen an org design change that worked like really, really well. Like they're always bumpy, and anyway, sometimes it takes a long time to get them worked out and it's not very efficient. But I would say this one was critical to our success. And again, the people already had the skills and talent to do it. We had the right tools in the wrong toolbox, but now we've got the right toolbox and we're able to do these things. So what I would say, my philosophy coming in, I've been influenced by, again, folks on LinkedIn who have really challenged my paradigms about certain things, but like Nick Shackleton Jones, more resources, less courses. I mean, the first time I heard him say nobody Googles an e-learning course, I was like, oh, that's so true. That's so true. I tell my folks, create useful stuff. If you're creating useful stuff that people can use in the flow of work, I said, you're making friends and you're building your reputation of somebody who's valuable. You're not trying to push your L&D agenda on them. You're saying, how can I help you remove a pain point? So that was one of the things we really started to focus on, is looking at the business problems in that way. I've told my team, I want our metrics as much as possible to be the business metrics. Then we're talking the same language as the business leaders. So I think the org design change, the business partnership model, I already had great people, the folks that left, and we hired new people in. We hired in excellent people to complement our team. I think all of that has been, what can I say? I'm blessed. I'm really blessed with a great team.
You just said something about metrics, and I want to dive just a little bit deeper there. I am also an engineer and love the numbers, which is probably where I ended up here. You've said, I think twice now, butts and seats doesn't matter to me. The regular L&D metrics are not what we care about. So tell me, Mitchel MacNair, engineer, how do you think about analytics and metrics?
I think what's important about this in the L&D space is, and before my past life, I don't think we spent enough time focused on this, which is something that I've always said in the very beginning for our team here, is you can never start with data too early. So when we have a discovery call and somebody says, I have this pain point, the first things we want to ask is, what data do you have today that's showing you that you have a pain point? Is this anecdotal, or can we talk to people? Even if you don't have data, can we help you establish a baseline of this is the is state? So from there, then we have very pointed conversations around what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and how do you know if you're winning? Basically, what does that look like on the other side? The thing about this is that, and why it's so different from like what we were talking about earlier, you've got to kind of have permission by building your credibility and reputation, because these things take longer. It takes more thought to be able to do this. But at the end of the day, when you come back with the data, that speaks volumes to our leaders. I'll just give you one example. One of our programs, we were looking at how does this help open more sales opportunities? How many more services are sold? How many unique products are sold? How many more deals are closed? From our control group and our test group, 33% more sales opportunities after they completed our program. 192% more services sold, over 200% more products sold, over 36 more deals won. So when we go back to our leadership, again, this isn't L&D metrics. We're saying this is how we've helped equip our sales leaders be more efficient and more effective in their work. That's how I think about metrics. You need to have a before and after. I think you need to be rigorous in your measurement and your methodology, but I think it needs to be simple and clear so that people outside of learning can clearly see that you're making a difference. I know your efforts may not be the sole reason why that needle moved, but we can show that we are having an impact. And if we can at least show that we're looking at the same metric as our business partners, they appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's interesting there too is you chose something that is very measurable. Impact on sales is one of our favorite places to go because we can show it. But to the point of building the reputation, it is then a far more natural transition to say, okay, this is what we were able to do in sales with these types of numbers. For a slightly less measurable outcome, we believe we're having the same impact because we use the same approach or methodology or something like that. Like it's a much easier story to tell because you started with something that was so quantifiable.
I agree. In another part of our business, we're looking at customer calls between our project managers and their customers. So this is once a deal has been signed and now you have a project and they're working with that customer on a project. But one of the things we wanted to focus on is how can we improve that experience from our customers and the experience internally so that those calls are more meaningful and have produced better results. And so we have maybe a little more fluffy objects that we're looking at, but we have a rubric. We did a baseline with the leader observing a call and having them use a rubric to say, assess against the rubric of what you saw. And we come back a little bit later, we do another assessment, and at the end, we'll do a final assessment. And so we're taking a snapshot of what is our baseline as we're implementing certain things, and then we wait a while to give them time to actually practice because it's all about practice. And then over time, we see that that needle's moving. And so that's another way that we do it. And I think it speaks volumes when you have the data.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to shift gears for a minute and move into our lightning round, which is one of our favorite sections because it gives us a chance to help the audience get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to lead off with our first lightning round question. And I really like this one, which is, what is the best prank you've experienced or planned?
Okay, so I was back in engineering. It was a colleague, but we took a screenshot of his desktop and then we made that his desktop. We just put it up as his desktop. And he was clicking on everything and he thought it wasn't working. And he was basically just clicking on the picture of his desktop. So it's a simple one, but it was really good. It worked out well.
Oh, that one is eminently stealable. That's awesome. And I have to say, I'm glad you did not mention something on a nuclear sub.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No pranks there. Not that I can tell you of. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Don't tell us.
The second question is, what advice would you give to a new hire at a company?
Yeah, I love this one because I'm a big proponent of coaching and mentoring. And it stems from my own personal experience, which is I would tell people, even at Dow, when I first came to Dow, people were like, Mitchell, why are you always smiling? And I said, because coming from the Navy on a submarine, my threshold for happiness is so low. Like I get to see the sun every day. I get to go home to my family every day. I tell new people, take the most challenging assignments early. As early as you can, challenge yourself as hard as you can because that provides a reference point. Because there on forward, you'll be able to say, well, this isn't as bad as that was. I can do this. So it gives you confidence and you get a chance to set a reputation early and just really rocket and propel your career because you have an opportunity to do great things early and that sets you up for more opportunities later.
So Mitchell, what is the kindest act you have ever done?
The one that I will share with y'all, I think is important, not for what I actually did, but the takeaway from it. And that is when I first came into my role as a director of engineering at Dow, I had an employee it was like my second day as director. Now, I will tell you that I had come back to the group that I had left 3 years prior. So I was familiar with the people on the team. So I knew this person. But when I came back in, they were on a performance improvement plan. And I was having the meeting with HR and that person to put them on a performance improvement plan, like my first day in the role coming back to engineering. What had happened with this person is that they were coming from a different site and they had been promoted to a different level. And at that site, that was appropriate for that level. But when they came to our large engineering site, what they were doing at a site level was not on the same par as our people at the same level at the main engineering office. So that was the issue. All I told this person was, I said, I know it's scary because HR's here. And I know this seems scary. I said, but I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to help you be successful. I said, I'm going to pair one of our top engineers underneath you to support you. They'll coach upward. I said, I just want you to know I believe in you. I know you can do this. We'll work through this PIP and you'll be fine. Years later, when that person was retiring, they reached out to me and they said, you remember that day? I said, yes. That was my first day back to engineering. Yes, I do. I very much remember that day. She told me, she says, I was this close to like, I'm going to quit. But she said, you believed in me.
Aww.
And that's what it took. The reason why I share that is because like in the moment, I didn't realize what kind of an impact that would have on somebody, but it's just reminded me, and I share this with my kids all the time, like be an encourager to others, speak life into other people. I said, because you never know how what you say might impact that person. And I said, so always try to make it a positive impact. By the way, I tell my team the same way. Every interaction that you have with a stakeholder, try to make it a positive one because you only get so many interactions with people. Each little piece is building your reputation or what they think of you. So anyway, that's what I would say. To me, I was just telling the person the honest truth. I believed in her and I was going to do everything I could to make her successful, but that had an oversized impact on her, which I didn't know of until years later.
That's really cool. All right, let's jump back in. As we've been doing this learning strategy work, one of the things that we keep hearing from leaders is, oh, I'd really like to be more strategic. I'd really like to do that thing, but my organization won't let me. You came in and in a year and a half, you've been able to sort of build the reputation of L&D. So I'm curious, like, how did you change the minds of the organization, letting them know that you were going to do things differently, but if they have trust in you, things will be better?
Okay, so the first part I can't take credit for. When I first got here, my VP who was here at the time, because of his reputation, he had already built up some reputation with some of these business leaders to tell them, we're going through this org design change. We're going through this new business partnership model. Give us some grace. Trust the process.
Right.
Give us some grace. Let us get this up and running. So that's kind of where I showed up, is right when this was all being started at the very beginning. So what I would say is that what makes a difference, again, goes back to delivering with excellence, so that you do have a chance to do something different. And so the first couple opportunities that we had after that, we delivered. And they were like, okay, we like what we see. Let's see more of that. Then you just kind of get momentum going. Once you get momentum, this momentum of excellent execution, it does wonders for you and your team, and it gives you a lot more opportunities. It's not that way across the board. Like all leaders across the company, part of my role and part of my development, I've only been here a year and a half. I would say the first 6 months was like, I'm building a team. I'm trying to establish myself as a leader for my team, for my own professional development. And as I move forward, my development plan is to continue to build out my accountability partnership map and really get to spend more time with those VPs and directors across the company, because I need to build those relationships with them, again, to help them see what is possible from our team. We're building a portfolio of execution. Like we're keeping examples of the things that we're doing. So when I have those meetings, I can pull those things up in the moment and say, let me show you an example of what we did over here in the towers business. I think we can do that for you too. So I think that's a big part of it. In some cases, like trying to get involved early, and I think I mentioned this to you in our prep, Danny, was we heard that the folks in data security were prepping an AI solution or policy, an AI policy for the company. My team and I talked, and I was like, hey, we need to be in on the front part of that. I mentioned I hear a lot of talks about AI, especially AI in L&D, but the reality is until you solve this higher level problem, and L&D can help solve the higher level problem for the company, which is people just want to know, what are my guardrails? Like, how can I do this without getting in trouble or getting fired? And do I have a sandbox that I can play in to try it out? Show me some examples of what people are doing that's acceptable use inside the company, and then I can adopt it. We immediately partnered with that director in our company My team is very good, very fast. They put together an AI enablement strategy with a couple phases. But the first phase is supporting the policy. Again, it's focused on what their objective is, not what we want to do. So our first objective is how can we support you roll out this policy and really help people understand the basics of AI, what's responsible use and ethics of AI, just some basic stuff. But we also, in our proposal, we have phase two, which is, hey, we want to set up a SharePoint site that we can show people, here's how people are using AI in the company. Here's the AI tools that we have available in the company. Some people don't even know. Every vendor that you have partnered with, I guarantee you, is coming out with some AI piece to their solution or their platform. And so just having people be aware of what has been vetted through even existing partners, it's good for the company to see and have some visibility and transparency around that. So we want to create a sandbox and a community of practice around how we're using AI inside the company. That's where we want to eventually go to. The third phase is a little bit deeper about leadership, leading AI projects and things like that.
So I actually think this is really interesting, Mitchel, and it goes back to a question I asked you earlier about the convergence of some of these things. AI is not the purview of L&D. L&D can use it. L&D has a responsibility to help build skills, but it's not their purview. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And on the pre-call, you were talking about influence with DEI issues and influence with AI and some of these types of things. And I'm wondering two things. First, do you see this as the purview of L&D? Should you be playing a role in these things? And then the second thing is, and it might be the same answer, it might just be trust, but how are you getting into those discussions? Because clearly upskilling an organization or skilling an organization is a really important part of all of these bigger, hairy challenges.
Yeah. So for the first question, should we be involved? When I think about our strategy and where we are in our evolution and our journey on that strategy, it's still establishing credibility with leaders that we haven't worked with yet. When I find out there is an opportunity for us, again, it's kind of like our principal designers being that gatekeeper to say, do we have an opportunity to help partner with you in some way? Is that coming in our intake, or do I just have it as a consulting? But either one of those cases, we can show our expertise and partner with them in that to build credibility. And so for the AI piece, nobody was asking us. I don't know that anybody would have come to us, maybe at some point.
Right.
I had a friend that said, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So I was like, what is it going to hurt to reach out to the director of enterprise security and say, hey, we think we can help you with this. Let us show you how. But we had to pull something together to show him this is what that could look like. And he was thrilled. But he wasn't thinking, hey, we should bring in learning and development into this meeting. He wasn't thinking that. But now we're called into those steering team meetings to help as a thought partner think about those things. I think it's harder at larger companies because there's a lot more people involved. It's especially in matrix companies. It's just difficult always to know like who needs to be involved. I think building coalitions in general is a very difficult job for leaders to do. It's easy to handle things that's in your silo, right? But when you're trying to handle something that crosses a couple different functions or different business units, that becomes more difficult. So this is part of my development. I'm being very transparent here. It's imperative that I continue to build those relationships so that we can be thought of first when they start these larger initiatives. Like in the future, if we have something else like an AI policy getting rolled out, I would like them to say, hey, let's bring in Mitchel or somebody from his team to sit in and be a thought partner for us, at least on the first part, the visioning of what this might look like. We're getting there though. I think that's the key. It is easier in smaller organizations because there's less people and it's easier to get to know people. And people wear multiple hats. So sometimes I can talk to you and in a big company, I might have to talk to 3 people. So I think there's some of that there.
So let's talk about one of those big, hairy, cross-functional initiatives, which is skills. I know that you obviously have been doing a lot of work with skills, both at your current company and previously. So tell us a little bit about what role your function's playing in that larger skills effort.
When I first came to Crown, I think I mentioned our team was the recipient of, we were one of the first people to go through the career pathing work that was being led by my peer colleague in talent acquisition, setting up our job levels and the desired outcomes for each of those levels. As we've gone through that process, we were working with a consultant to identify what are the top skills associated with each job. And so we had a process that we were going through with that. We are a partner with Cornerstone, a relatively new partner with Cornerstone. We started with their performance management module first, but we're looking at expanding that and using some of the other modules to help us with our skills data management. I always tell people in my mind, I call it my skills triangle. There's skills that your people have, and that's the supply. And then Talent Act and I would say comp and benefits also have a part of this, which is what are the skills that you need by the role? So that's the demand. So you have supply and demand. And I think once you have those in place and you have a clear view of those, then like individuals can start thinking about, oh, you're saying I need to have this skill. I know if I have it or not. That, yeah, you could tell them and show them. You could collect that. They should have that in the system. But even for L&D, like having that kind of data gives us a longer runway to be able to help strategically plan and put things together for critical skill and capability development. The third part of the triangle is that market data, so that we don't become isolated or insulated by how we talk about skills or using skills inside the company. So for us, I would say we're still early on that journey inside of Crown. We have very good start on the demand side. And then the next piece, once we get more further in our systems, we'll be able to get the supply side. I don't know if we might eventually partner with Lightcast or somebody like that for the market data. We haven't gotten that far yet, but to me, that's the third piece of it, to get that data.
Interesting. In that, you're already involved. So in a lot of organizations, we see L&D being completely left out or leading it by themselves. and it seems like your organization has done a better job of creating a cross-functional sort of coalition to get that done.
I would say there's a couple groups. Obviously, HR technology, talent acquisition, and then my team are the ones really spearheading this.
Yeah.
Part of it is we're also having to go up through our HR leadership and to our executive management team to help them see the bigger picture of it's not skills for skill's sake. That's just the infrastructure. That's the currency. But now you can talk about what do you buy with that currency? What does that get you? So that's the part where we're working with our leaders to help them see that. I think they have a general idea of what that is. So I'm thankful for that. There's been a lot of work done by my colleagues even before I got here to kind of talk about that longer journey that we're on. But I'm excited that I think we're moving in the right direction. We never move as fast as I want to move.
Yeah.
I think that's probably true for most people, but it's a long game. It's not something you can just do overnight, especially like we've talked about how the skills data impacts all sub-functional areas of HR. So there's a lot of work to be done in there and a lot of change management that goes along with this work.
Mitchell, thank you for being with us. We are going to wrap with one final question. This is the question that we ask everybody that's on our podcast. And that question is, why do you do the work that you do?
When I was in engineering, I had a great boss who told me, Mitchell, you have more to offer this company than just instrument engineering. You need to go figure out what that is. I don't know what it is. I came across a book that was called Is Your Genius at Work by Dick Richards. And the subtitle was 4 Key Questions to Ask Before Your Next Career Move. So I was like, this is perfect timing. I'll read this book. But what I will tell you is that book is one of my top 3 books of all time because it has enabled me to have a compass for my career. But my genius or unique core talent that I discovered from this was optimizing experiences. So when I think about my time from engineering to supply chain, back to engineering to HR to L&D, the common thread across all of that is how do I optimize the experience for others? And so from a learning standpoint, I believe that we have an incredible opportunity to help people develop expertise. There's something motivating about having expertise. It's an intrinsic motivator, a sense of expertise. Helping people be excellent at something and in service to our people to help them be excellent. And by virtue of that, they do great work for the company. So it's a win-win. That's what really drives me every day. If I can help somebody be successful in their job, yes, they're going to drive more value for the company. That's a secondary piece. But for me, I want to help people be great at what they're doing.
Thank you, Mitchell, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Workplace Stories. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to know about future episodes. For exclusive access to our research, insights, and a vibrant network of human capital leaders, consider joining the Red Thread Research community. Visit redthreadresearch.com to learn more and to take your workplace to the next level.